Good evening. You're watching CU at USC. I'm your host, Daniel DiMaso, and tonight we have Dr. Paul Young of the USC Thornton School of Music. Stick around. Welcome back to CU. Again, we're here with Dr. Paul Young. Dr. Paul Young, thank you for coming on. You said to call you Paul as well.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So
yeah,
perfect.
right.
So yeah, I think I wanted to start off just kind of how you got started with music. I know you're a musician as well, and you've spent a lot of time, obviously, on the business side of it. What kind of came first?
Obviously, the music.
Right.
And I think it does for most everybody at this place where we're starting off at USC.
Yeah.
That the music passion starts for all of us. I was playing trombone when I was 10, and that's a silly, ridiculous thing for most people, you know, at an early age in the 21st century kind of a thing now, to think that that would be your starting point. But you know, in those
I started trombone age 12.
Oh, you're as silly
So I was a
as
little
I
bit
am
behind
then.
you. Yeah.
Right. So I started off on the trombone because my band director came around, like they do in a lot of schools, and said, "Hey, we have a band, and
You can
here's
buzz
some
your
instruments."
lips and you can play the trombone.
That's the only one that he actually played well. So that's the one that stuck out to me as the one that I thought, that sounds pretty good. You know, somehow, in a crazy way, that informed a whole path of wanting to be into the business of it. And just always feeling like the drive for music is my passion point in my business and my livelihood has always been consistent.
It sounds like through your schools, just generally they had great music programs, a good director that kind of took you through, or?
I did love every band director that I had along the way, but it was California. Prop 13 was going through, and which was affecting the amount of money available for schools. And actually I saw a lot of my band directors get pink slips. And I think that might have been one of the reasons I didn't end up a music educator until much later in life in a different way.
So how did that the passion for music kind of stick with you through programs that maybe weren't the best?
Well, you know, I had a good experience. It's just it wasn't necessarily a robust kind of a thing like some of the different states have with different funding and those kinds of things. But you were asking me about, like, how did it stick with me?
Yeah.
As a passion driver, I think, you know, early on, and I say the same thing to my students now, if you could wake up every morning and get charged up for what you go to work because it's what you love, you know, that would be probably a good driver for what you should choose for the rest of your life that you'd want to do.
Yeah.
You could go for aptitude, you can go for where's the money, and you can go for where's my passion. And if you can find a sweet spot, but if you have to pick one, for me, it's always been your passion driver is what keeps compels you to go forward.
That's incredible. So I was reading in your bio that you started like booking musicians around age 13. If I'm reading correctly, how?
I wasn't an agent kind of thing.
I was just very curious.
Yeah, well,
what
that's
that
an early.
meant.
So I had kind of a leader propensity early on in a kind of a driven way. I guess you could say it's a little bit more ego-driven when I was younger than it is now, but because I'm kind of done with the ego side of it. But at 13, I wanted to lead a band, and so I was in a traditional jazz group. You know, it's because the trad jazz, sometimes called Dixieland kind of things. In Sacramento, there was a big festival up there, and so that was for a trombone player. That was something I could do, and I was growing up with my grandparents who loved that music and that kind of thing, and so. I was in this youth group that was outside of school, and I just felt like I wanted to lead. I wanted to see where it could go and that kind of thing. So I started booking my own group. So it's kind of like being a band leader.
I see.
And they had to drive me to my first everything because I'm 13 years old, right? But we were on kind of an anomaly as a young group. That, you know, look at these little kids and they're playing this stuff that's from, you know, decades before this. And so it was actually kind of a small business and learning about managing and leading a group and picking the music and making sure everything's going to happen on time and with the right people and all that kind of things. It was a early education before I even realized where I was going.
Right. So it sounds like the passion for jazz specifically and more classical forms of music came from like your grandparents.
My grandparents loved that particular music specifically. My grandfather's 1910, my grandmother's 1913. So that was kind of like they were coming around around those times. But no, that was I think in a lot of ways it was because I started at a trombone, and that's what you get at a Western classical tradition when you go to school, is you get the jazz and the classical kinds of things as your training early on before I'm not a purist about anything whatsoever. And what I teach now is absolutely pan-genre, and what I've lived is pan-genre, you know, so since then.
So you go through college. What's sort of your first job out of college? What are you doing? Are you looking immediately to stick with music, or was there ever a point where you thought?
Well, I actually have a music industry degree, like I teach here
Right.
at USC. There were only 3 schools in the country. I think Miami had one very early on before I was even born. But there was rarity. So where I was in Northern California, University Pacific, they had a program like that. So I set my sights on the music business as a degree path. And I remember being a freshman, first class at 17, saying, I want to be the president of Warner Brothers. I had no idea what that meant. That doesn't, you don't have any context at 17 when you say that. But I was driven to find the parallel between that music passion and the business life, and the kind of advocating for what we do is special and valuable and those kinds of things. So that got me down to LA and working in the record business and being a musician, like it's 2 professions simultaneously.
Being someone who, even from a very young age, was very ambitious, and then at 17, aiming for the very top of a top record label. What are there any sort of like parameters or any guidelines for you that would like define success, or certain themes that are very important for somebody to go ahead and
make music your profession in every way you possibly can? That would be, I mean, it's, if you can say a theme in a very generalized way, that was my theme, and I think it is for almost all my students that wouldn't have maybe chosen that music path, or they wouldn't choose a record company as their outcome. That's only one possible way to do it. It's just that that I want to do what I wake up and I work on is valuable. That what I create, how it influences people, is a product. It is a goal. It is a personal passion driving thing. That in any role I play, that's my profession. I add value to other people's lives, and that's how it pays me. And doing it through a product they love, as opposed to they need, like a toothbrush or something, or an insurance policy. That doesn't mean as much to me.
Yeah, so you've had wild success in the music industry as well as in performance. You've played with a lot of your heroes, Bobby McFerrin, other names are slipping my mind, but who is the, are there any like one person that you wanted to play with and got to play alongside?
I could do the celebrity name drop, but frankly, a lot of that stuff floats right by my mind now, because I've been playing music for 35 years, and that's there's been countless wonderful things that have happened along the way of Diana Krall and Arturo Sandoval, and I can't even remember everybody. Take Six and Natalie Cole and things that have happened at different points in my life, but they're not the same. They're a lot of ways they're the kind of the wonderful gigs. They're the high points of like, oh wow, I did that. I played with the LA Phil at the Hollywood Bowl. That happened. But I'm not a regular guy with those kinds of groups with most of them. The one that sticks with me right now is a name that not everybody knows, which is John DeVersa, who means the most to me as a musical experience, where it's a member of a band. Over the last 10 years, we just had 3 Grammy nominations, and being a member of a band, as opposed to just playing on the gig, is really meaningful to me. That we're making music I really love, and I'm seeing that other people are starting to recognize him for what he created, and being a part of that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Congratulations, by the
way. He did the work, really. I can say I'm in the band, but it's really his.
You're the horn in the back. You're sliding
along with it.
Sliding along.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you've been named as the new chair of the music industry program here at
July,
SC. Yes, announced to start in July. What has your experience been like? I know you got a degree here. What was it like for you to come back and start teaching here?
It was like returning back to college the first time. I think there's something about that sense of wonder and the place and age where you are, somewhere between 18 and 22-ish kinds of things, 17, 22, where you are in a discovery path and you see the possibilities of what could happen, and haven't experienced everything in life that could be the negative input of why that either won't work or shouldn't work, or you could get jaded about it. And I love that. I was in that place before, and I remember that sense of wonder as a musician, someone that's looking at their future in business and kinds of things. This is like a life in an oasis, or a bubble in a way, of like this wonderful spot, and I loved that electricity, and I wanted to come back to it. So the coming back to school was actually, and what I do for my living, it has only a small piece in comparison to what we were just talking about up to this point. Because I went to work for a record company, even though it wasn't Warner Brothers, and I didn't end up president. I worked for MCA Records, that became Universal Music Group through a merger. It was the largest record label of the world, and it's like the Coca-Cola of the record business, and was a licensing guy, and worked up through the ranks from starting off as a file clerk punching holes in paper and going all through those processes to then working on big Jay-Z and Eminem and Kanye records, and that too is like a blur in a way of like all the things that were going with it. All wonderful things, but I felt disconnected to some extent with the farther I went up the chain, the more I was responsible for millions of dollars very directly, and I don't fault that at all. It's a for-profit business, and I believe in that, that there should be a profession. I started to feel personally disconnected with the kid that started off in the passion points and that kind of thing. And I wanted to be around a college environment again. So I came back to here as a student to do my master's and doctorate in music, going back to those original roots. And they have a music industry program here, and it was electrifying for me to, I was reinvesting in myself to get new kinds of degrees to have multiple outcomes, not just the record business. And I just absolutely fell in love with USC, and so I'm like dyed-in-the-wool alum, besides now teaching here.
Of course.
And I see in a lot of my students maybe a different direction they want to go, but something that I connect with, that passion point of they want this to be their living. And there's flexible, different outcomes that everybody wants out of this situation, which I think is great. And I feel like I owe it to them to give something that I've been through, to kind of give them the trampoline to bounce off of that and go get their thing.
Of course.
So I love it.
So with you at the helm now, is there a specific direction that you want to go? Is there a mission that you have to accomplish that maybe sort of deters from the former path, or anything new that you want to bring?
Well, we're doing a lot of things right already. So what I also don't want to do is screw something up that goes really well. We've been doing this here. I say we, I wasn't part of it in the beginning of it, but we've been a music industry program for 20 years or so. And so we have a lot of really successful graduates. We are the premier school in the biggest major market of the world. So there's been a lot of success point, and a lot of alumni that are now out there that have come through this and are in different walks of this business, from live to the old business I did with the record business, but there's the business of songwriting, and there's also the technology components that can go together with the new delivery systems and all those kinds of things. So we've done a lot of things right. When you first come in, the worst thing I think you could do in any business is say, I'm going to change all of this. Instead, what I want to do is try to make sure that we do our best job to connect with those alumni, because I think the leaders before me have been here for a long time and had great relationships, but with only 20 years deep, we haven't really created that bond as much. That I want to do the Trojan network, that mentor is part of us, and that we're not done with you alumni base just because you stop paying your tuition, that you stop putting in the debt towards the tuition, if that was the way it works. And make sure that we have a strong connection with them, so that they can mentor our folks can learn from them.
Absolutely.
And so I'd say it was about relationships for me first.
And we were just speaking before, you helped develop a new major program? Is that
we have
correct?
a major and we have a minor. And our major and our minor are robust programs. And they're already kind of maxed at where they're going to be. What's just got approved yesterday was a Master's of Music Industry, Master of Science in Music Industry.
Absolutely.
And so it's for folks that did not get this as their background. So it's not a continuation degree.
I see.
It's kind of like the MBA situation where you could tack this on to just about any other degree if you want to change your course, in your career path. So those that did not study this, but this is their goal, then it is a master's degree that's focused on that. So it has some of the fundamentals of what our bachelor's degree does. It's not necessarily competitive because it has some other outcomes. I want to create creative problem solvers in our undergrad and our graduate program. It's somewhat accelerated. 1 year on the ground with the third semester is purely online, so they can move on to their lives, but they're still not so accelerated that they don't master, like the word says.
Yes.
So I'm pretty proud of it. We've been working on it for over a year, and it just got approved yesterday to launch in fall 18.
Absolutely.
And so I want to create the next generation of thinkers, not just a process or a fact, or that we threw everything out. I don't believe that there's that everything old is irrelevant, but you don't ignore that I'm taking care of this person from this point forward in a master's or a bachelor's degree.
Well, I'm sure the students in the fall of 18 will be excited to pursue that program. We have to get to a commercial break.
Okay.
Stay tuned and stick around for more See You at USC with Dr. Paul Young. We'll be back. All right, you're watching See You at USC. Welcome back. Dr. Paul Young still with us. He hasn't left. So I want to ask you a little bit about your outlook on how streaming has sort of changed the record industry.
It's a big question.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. By the time I can answer that for most of my students, I've already got them through 8 units of classes at that cost. So, so I would have to do it in a condensed way for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
To say that. In a way, it's an inevitable thing about technological disruption.
Right.
Every business goes through a technological disruption kind of a thing, and we change and we don't look backwards. Fads, technologies are never a fad. We're here now, and it's an ease of convenience and access and a price point situation that causes solutions to what the first wave of technological disruption was like, to say that the file is uncontained, where are we going with all of this? I can't sell the same record as I used to.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity involved in it that I think is really great. There's also some changes we need to go through about the values part of things. What's the value of our product? What do we do? Most people saw the value equation about the old system of a physical product as a manufacturing cost and maybe a distribution cost, like I have to go to a store and have to get a thing, and that's all gone, and that's better. And that this is so much easier to access, so there would be something that's going to pay into this so much better. But it's not really a one-to-one how those dollars work, and that's been a struggle to a certain extent. And I think the outlook is the future is generally bright. It should only improve. But there's definitely new suppliers that have a different viewpoint on what it is we do and what our value is. Some of them have come up through the MP3 as piracy era, and they're now the drivers of those kinds of things. And piracy kind of has this connotation of like, are you saying sharing or are you saying piracy? Which way are we talking about this kind of thing? And there's so many different views on that. But all those viewpoints of how our culture looks at it affects the value question in a business. So it's really not just the distribution and the reproduction kind of cost of the goods that's really involved in it. It's also what most people don't see as a marketing cost. Or they see the opportunity with social media and seeing that this really shouldn't have to cost a whole lot of money to get available. But if you check your top 25 most played in iTunes or your playlists in Spotify and so forth, whatever you enjoy to use that, you'll find that marketing cost is not one person doing it themselves. You know, that while one person can tweet and cause a massive difference, and that's not to be diminished, how the artist can have a direct voice and have an impact. Of course. It doesn't show the number of professionals that are still involved in that process. Just like we're doing here, this room is full of professionals right now. You know, or budding professionals if they're not there yet. We're all working towards something in this room to cause something to do, to deliver something. So that manager, that producer, those engineers that you want to work with, who are those side artists you want to? If Chainsmokers want to work with Halsey, she's not free. If you know, kind of thing. Or she could be, but if everybody works for free, it's not a profession; it's a hobby.
Of course.
So I'd like for my first half, I'm always focused on that profession. I care about that. When you relate that to streaming, to start at a dollar that is ad-based and may not get the same views as, Drake has got so many views that he's the highest viewed, and they've just read an article that he should have made about $50 million. I don't believe that he's actually made $50 million. And that's the highest level of streaming. So we haven't worked out the value question, I think. Subscribers is where it's at. If you want a short answer, the holy grail is everybody moving to subscriptions, and not everybody wants to. So, whether it's college students at $5 a month, and $10 a month seems to be a going price for most of the other services. If we could get to the point that we have about 3 to 4 times the number of subscribers as we have right now, then we're into a Netflix, Amazon Prime type world, and everything changes in a dramatic way. But the free ad-based works really well when you're starting off, and it is your own costs, and it's your own creation. It's from your laptop in your bedroom, or something a little better than that, kind of thing. And your friends are helping you out, and then you use social media to your advantage. That is a good thing. That is an awesome part of where I can get from there to SoundCloud for free and easy, or I can go through a few digital distributors, and I can be at iTunes and Spotify and Apple Music, where everybody else is. But the next layer of, I want to work with professionals to make that high quality professional product that matches what's in everybody else's top 25 most played. That's
and the marketing costs, you said, to reach that platform. Yes,
that's what overwhelming it is, and that's before and after the digital era. It's always been marketing is the biggest expense. How do how do I get above the noise floor? How do I let people know that what I do is special, and that you should be paying attention to this? And that is getting on the Jimmy Fallon show and having the the guy with the karaoke with the cars and those kinds of things. How do those relationships happen? How do I get there? It's not just tweeting something that I get there.
Exactly. So for a budding young musician who maybe has reached a certain level of audience via free streaming, SoundCloud, something like that, who are now at the stage where record labels want to sign them and sort of give them all of those the benefits
of the connections.
What's something that, from the artist standpoint, that they should look out for in terms of contracts? What's your advice on your go-tos, traps to stay away from?
Clout matters. So the longer that someone stays at the do-it-yourself independent level and has success with that, the greater clout they have in a relationship when they want to plug into what is our rights agreement, our sharing of this outcome, kind of thing. What am I bringing to the table? What are you bringing to the table? Is always a variable. Everything's negotiable. So the longer someone can work on their own, before they get to the point that they then have to work with another company, team, and so forth.
Okay.
The better the deal that they have for themselves. And it's almost a requirement at this point. The idea, it's kind of yesteryear romanticized to think that there's somebody that's going to be combing the clubs and combing YouTubes for the undiscovered star, and it's going to take someone that has no views and go to the next level. An independent label does do that at this point, but the big machine kind of thing of where everybody's going to see me, the major ones don't, for the most part. Not that they wouldn't, but for the most part, that's like I'm plugging into inertia. So I already see that if this is going, I just need to pour a little gasoline on that thing. That's already a wildfire, and I just take it off from there. What are you looking for? So it's always about clout. There's a question of who owns this product, the recording itself. A record deal has always been kind of an exchange for the product, the ownership of that, what you created. The subject of a record deal is not the artist, it's actually the recordings. So I will play into that, I will help to market that, but then I'm going to own that, and you can have a piece of that money that of what I do, and we have a sharing on that kind of situation. And now I think there's a lot more of the hybrid kinds of deals where the artist is owning it, saying, look, I don't need to do this with you, and I can point to Macklemore, a Chance, and so many others, and just give you a point of reference. I don't have to do that. And that changes the nature of those deals. So what to look out for? One of the first things is if you're early on, the amount of money that's going to be given up front is going to be low, whether it's in marketing or the money to make a record and to live on. It could be non-existent. It could be that I don't own this, and plugging in at a later point, I can own this. I can be given a lot more money up front to make a different kind of a record, something that's I couldn't have done on my own with that kind of resources and folks and that kind of thing. What kind of rights do I have to control over what's done with it? Where is it sold? How's it? You might hear like Taylor Swift doesn't want her stuff on Spotify. It's kind of 2 years ago story. What gives you that right to say that if it's not your product? So the clout going into it is actually not all that changed in that way, where it's how much do you have going into this deal? So, and then usually the cycle after that is someone's been doing that for a while. They've made several records in that kind of mainstream way of help, and then they might return back to saying, not where I give something away and not where I'm the royalty base. Instead, it's my product, and I put this out, and I'm hiring people now that I have money to have my own staff support my product. So there's kind of a life cycle of independence to sign to the next phase. And if you go too early, you have less rights, you have less income.
Of course. So it's about holding out as long as you can, sort of forging a name for yourself.
Yeah, I think so. You can equate it to any other business. If I'm going to start a restaurant, then I would say that the longest I could run that business as a small business by myself before I take on a restaurant manager and 5 waiters and those kinds of things, the better off. And equating to streaming kind of thing, I mean, it would be a silly, shortened way to say this, but if my hamburger is 5 cents and my waiter's $250,000, it's not a good deal. So it's like I have to understand my economics of how long I can hold out. But the first phase is grow the fans. The second phase after that is monetize in a way that's different than free. For most people, give it away for free until they don't have to.
I see. Yeah. What is your sort of advice for monetizing when you are streaming music for free? I mean, is it obviously merchandise is probably big. Doing shows. Are there other creative ways that you are seeing?
At all points of the process, everybody wants to play live. So shows are also a way you can lose money if you go big too fast.
Okay.
And it's a way you gain money at any phase if you can contain your costs. And at the high end, it's still one of the best ways to make money. Without a doubt, it's one of the biggest ways to make it when you can afford to charge a high price to your concert, your tour, your festival, those kinds of things. But how do you make it? How do you make money while you're in the free streaming? It's not easy. It's not. There's no. Like, here it is, I can give it to you.
There's no
Just
cheat,
an unfortunate catch-22 is you're investing in your business. Just like almost anybody if you're asking someone from Marshall School of Business, so you probably get the same kind of, you're going to take a loss for a few years.
Yeah, of
you're going to invest.
Spend money to make money kind of thing,
You're building into the first process that you're losing to gain later kind of thing, and then you hope you gain.
Is there any sort of trend or fad or new technology on the horizon that you see that might be changing the game in the next 10, 15 years? Do you see it going anywhere else?
Yeah, because we're accessing our music through our phones. I think that there's actually a trend to look at continents we haven't even seen come online yet. I'm very interested in one about blockchain, and which was a subset of Bitcoin, but especially blockchain, and how I'm following something. Benji Rogers is someone that was the principal founder of Pledge Music, and now he's working for a company about blockchain, talking about how can we find the data to track every single thing that's out there, have a transparent contract of what happens in every transaction so that every transaction is monetized. That we're in an era where that's possible. Sure. And where there's different continents coming on. We have not largely in the record business, to use the record business as an example. There's continents, Africa, South America, a lot of Asia, Antarctica, I don't know what that would give us, but they haven't been record markets for us. And if everybody's going through a phone, including even a phone billing situation, that puts half the world that wasn't in the game, you know. Right. So I think that I don't even look at it necessarily as streaming companies or the telecommunications companies, because that implies that. Necessarily that I have the answer, you know, I'm not Madame Cleo with the crystal ball about how this is going to go. But I see that the way that transaction can be monetized, every transaction can be monetized, is something that's very different than the physical world or even the streaming versus piracy, I don't know who you are kind of world. I think there's some neat things coming. Yeah, so it was like what you were talking about earlier about how if we had 3-4 million more people on the streaming services, everything would be back to normal. And I think if some of those more than 3,
countries...
4 million. I think we need about 200 million if it's streaming. But you're asking 10 to 15 years out. I think it's everybody who has a transaction on the phone is actually trackable, whether they like it or not. It sounds very Big Brother, but we're already giving away our privacy all over the place. We know we voluntarily give it to, you know, a lot of the services that we use, right? So, and then file tracking sounds icky when it was the digital rights management file, you know, tracking type of thing. But the reality is we're here, and that we are not anonymous with what we do. Right. And so instead of seeing this as a negative, I see it as a really great positive that for the music business, we could look at this as monetized and have a billing system that works through a phone bill. Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to big changes. That's all the time we have for tonight. Yeah. Thank you for watching See You at USC. Again, thank you, Dr. Paul Young, for coming on. Join us every night weeknights at 6:30 p.m. I'll see you next week. Have a good night.
Hey, Erica, can we talk? Hey.
How are you doing?
I'm great. But I miss the newest episode of See You